Hey, my creative friends. It is time to talk creativity. My name is Shannon from shannonsstudio.com. And I do a lot of different things creatively, but for these videos, I like to talk about creativity and having a creative life and bring some thoughts together so that, because I feel like I have mentioned before, I feel like creativity starts way before you make the thing. And so some of these videos are to address some things that we think about when we want to be creative, or what hinders us from being creative, or what a creative life looks like. And I throw a little bit of Sweden in there since I'm living in Sweden for a couple of years. And today, first day of our 3-week Christmas vacation, and so it was a totally kickback day. I mean, I did chores, dishes, laundry, that sort of thing, but I mean, we didn't have to go out and do the few miles, 4 miles to school and back. And so it was cold and rainy, so it was perfect to stay in. We had hot chocolate, and just when I just really had a slow-paced day. And it's nice to have those, especially around Christmas time, especially around the holidays where things can start to be hectic. On the idea of holidays, a lot of people I know, he goes to an international school, so hey Trisha. So going to an international school means that a lot of the people that go there are heading to different places of the world for their holidays. And they have 3 weeks off, so it's a long time to be, and that you can get a good chunk of time being with family and going to these different places. So a lot of people all over the world going places. And so a lot of people, even when they're not going too far, are going to see family and having the family fun and doing their traditions and all the fun things that make us and draw us to family. But sometimes when you have these kinds of gatherings, things can just kind of percolate up that have been avoided, and they're not necessarily the positive things of family. And a little while back, we were talking about what people say to us. And I remember Trisha capsulized the thought of consider the source. That's what she made in the comments. And that has stuck with me for a while. And so tonight we're going to talk about consider the source. Usually when you hear that, there's a negative connotation with it, meaning somebody said something you didn't like, and then the answer to that is consider the source, meaning that you can dismiss it, disregard it, because they shouldn't be taken seriously for various reasons. And so that has that negative connotation that it just sums it up. You don't have to listen to what they say. Sometimes that is the absolute truth. You shouldn't listen to what somebody has to say. But then there's the flip side to that. And I think when things are said to us that kind of make us bristle, we should always consider the source. We should have a process where we go through and reflect on it, think about what they're saying, as if to look at it to say, is it valid for me to listen to what they say? And not just take the negative connotation to dismiss, but to actually think about it. Now, this doesn't mean go on days and days and days and have it play a loop in your head. This is like an actual, let's think about this in an adult manner and see if there's any validity to it or not. So I was going through, and some of the things that you can determine right off is if this person is not somebody to listen to. So they are a troublemaker. They consistently lie. They gossip. They have been proved wrong before when they've given advice. They lack credibility. They don't have your best interest in mind. I mean, so right off, you can see certain things happening there where you go, let's just dismiss that. Let's just dismiss whatever they said or did, because that has no validity. But then you know, when you weigh something, there's, you know, you kind of have this balance to see whether, you know, how things do weigh out. And so the other side of that balance is, are they speaking the truth at all? Is there any validity to it? Wade is watching. Hi, Wade. Really loved your graphic designs that you've been doing that I've seen. So does it sound, is it a sound argument? Is there evidence? Or have they been there for you at other times? So a lot of times we don't necessarily like what's being said, and it makes us bristle. So some other questions you can ask yourself to see if this, you know, to consider the source. And there's lots of little hearts and loves, because Wade, I know, loved me seeing his work and thinking it was pretty good, which dang, yeah, it was pretty good. So some of the things you can consider. So these are just some questions to ask yourself. What do they have to gain from saying what they've said or doing what they've done? Do they have something to gain from this? What bias do they have? I mean, we all have biases. What is their bias? And when you're looking at family relationships or close friends or things, are they close to you? You know, what is the relationship? And that to me is one of the key things, is what is the relationship? If it's somebody online, dismiss. No thinking about that. Dismiss what they are saying. They do not know you. This should be a no-brainer. That, yeah, you can read it, you can be mad about it, but you let that go, because they don't know you. They have no relationship with you, which is so interesting. This is, in researching this, I went to Marcus Aurelius. He's a Roman Empire. He was a Roman Empire, emperor in the Roman Empire, and his book Meditations. And it is so interesting that in 161 to 180, that's when he would have written this, AD, he has a list of what he says is, as those who offend me, let me consider. So interesting. I mean, nothing's new. These problems that we have, these things, it's really not new. It was around in 161 AD. And so he has a list. One of the things that he says first is, what's the status of the relationship? You know, who am I to mankind? Who am I to this person? And he actually uses, a ram over a flock, or a bull over a herd, kind of referencing some kind of stewardship. Stewardship meaning there's a responsibility to people, there's an obligation, there's a protection, there's, care that goes on in that relationship. You have to look closely at the relationship to see what kind of relationship it is, where, is there some kind of stewardship thing. That for me draws the line. If I see something in a store, if I see some people that I'm associated with, that I know their life and stuff like that, and they do something, I don't necessarily feel it's my place to go up and say something. But if it's a family member, if it's a close friend or something, I might venture. Not always, but I feel like there's that connection, that stewardship, where you have some kind of obligation, some kind of responsibility. And in this world, you have on the one hand, if you see something, say something. Then on the other hand, if you say something, you shouldn't be saying anything at all. How dare you? So we have to be adults about this and weigh it correctly. That's why consider the source. You have to weigh those things to see. And so one of the first things is you consider, is there any kind of connection, close connection? And like I said, internet's not it. One of the other questions to ask is, is the person generally negative or fault finding? Is that their pattern? Is that their lane? There's some people that no matter what, they're going to be nitpicking, and that's where they are. They have a negativity bias. And so that's where they land, and they're not pleasant. Kind of limit that, but don't consider what they say very strongly. Then consider that source. What is their reputation? So if somebody says or does something, And to you, and you have to consider their reputation. Do they always do this? Are they being hypocritical? Are they, what is their reputation? Do they know? Are they professional? Are they an expert? What is their reputation in this thing? So then you're weighing your pros and cons. You're considering the source. You can look at, if they're looking at you and saying something, you can certainly look at them and wonder about what are their morals? What are their principles? What are they? How are they in their life? Another thing you can ask yourself is, where did they get their information? Did they get their information from somebody who's somebody? Or did they get it from personal experience, from seeing something themselves or experiencing something themselves? That's something to consider when you're considering the source. Let's see, does it hurt me physically? If something hurts you physically, something that is if it plays out is going to hurt you physically, then do not consider their opinion as valid. Another idea is it from somebody I love? Another one is, who are they trying to please? Who are they trying to, do they have issues of their own with their own parent, their own children, their own best friend, and they're just playing it out with you? So those are some questions to ask yourself when you consider the source. A lot of times families get together and the conversations start happening, and past resentments, past hurts, or current start to be talked about, and it starts to escalate. And I'm going to read some more about what Marcus Aurelius said, which is very interesting. So he said, and I'm paraphrasing some of this a little bit, but I tried not to too much. So what's the status of the relationship? How are they related to mankind? How are they related to each other? 2, what manner of men, what manner is the person when they're, he says, at the table, at the bed, elsewhere. So what kind of person are they out and about in the world and privately? Because beds indicates private, and at the table it indicates public, behavior. What is their behavior in private and public? That's, this is 160 AD. And what principles do they hold themselves to? What is their reputation? Are they a principled person? So he's saying, consider this. If somebody offends you, consider this. Hi, Cassandra. Then 3, if they act rightly, like if they act morally or truthfully, don't take it wrong. He says, don't take it the wrong way. Intention means something. If they don't act morally or with truth of fact, then they do so because they're ignorant. So, number 4, he says, consider that you often offend, and so you're not any better than another person, and that even if you think you don't do something, offend as much as the other person, you still have that disposition. We all have that disposition to offend, and so take that into consideration when somebody offends you. Then he says, you can't be sure that they are entirely wrong. Which is, he kind of goes a little bit different vein when you're supposed to consider somebody who offends you. So you can't be sure that they are entirely wrong. Many things go into it with the possibility of being just and true. Sometimes what somebody says, it irritates us because there's some truth in it. And then we have to look at it. Is that truth immoral, or is it just a lapse in judgment and it was a one-time thing? Or, there's a lot of, it's a whole big thing. And that's why you have to consider, to look at every aspect of it. So another thing he says is you can't be, I read that. When you're worried or vexed, they use vexed, angry, worried. Remember, life is only really a moment, and pretty soon we're going to be gone. Do we want to spend our time being offended? Do we want to let that become who we are and weigh on us like that? 7 is he says, it's not the acts of others that disturb us. The actions are in their own souls. Our own opinions alone disturb us. And so that's kind of what I mean when it kind of, something just really bothers us. I know when I have looked at some of the things, you don't stay married 38 years and not have things come up. And I know sometimes the things Alan said, they really bothered me because there was some truth in it, and I had to look at myself. So he says, away with their thoughts and act. Don't entertain them in anger. And he says, how do you remove them? You reason that there's no dishonor or shame or insult. You just think that, you know what, there's not an insult there. I'm just not going to take that as an insult. And if you hold that there was dishonor or shame or insult, you may fall into that trap yourself. This is all 160 AD. I just want to go 2,000 years ago that this reasoning was going on, because these things were still applicable to people back then. So number 8, he has 9 things. Number 8, he says, how much worse harm do we suffer from our own anger and grief than from the original offense? Because we hold on to it. We're bitter about it. And all of a sudden that offense escalates into this other thing, and we suffer of our own made suffering. Yeah, they started this little flame, but we made it into a fire. And so he's basically saying, consider that. When you want to be offended, consider that as part of the process that you're going through. And number 9, which is so, the phrase, he says, meekness is invincible. And I just thought that was so, and he says, if it's without hypocrisy. So meaning it has to be real. When you are meek and it's real, you can diffuse all kinds of things. So meekness to me was one of the better definitions, was no bitterness of spirit. You don't really have the bitterness because you have the perspective. And I have been on both sides of that coin where, I'm not using meekness and I'm like all up and in an uproar. And then other times where I'm just like, totally get this. There's not a bitterness in my soul over this person. They've said some things and done some things they shouldn't, but it's not like I've held it and I'm like nurturing it and loving it. Sometimes we do that to ourselves. Okay, so he says, what can the most rude, disrespectful and insulting person do to you if you persist in civility towards them? What can they do? I mean, these are words that show them. Okay, first off, if the occasion arises, he says, gently admonish them, show them a better way, and in that moment, and skillfully prepare your remarks for the individual and the circumstance at hand. So those are 9 steps. I just came across that. I just do a little studying, and I just thought that is so interesting that the offense, and he had in his book Meditations, which was just for him. He didn't write it for people out or his contemporaries or any. He just did it for himself. This is his process for going about thinking about offenses. He also has said, if thou art pained by any external thing, it is not this that disturbs thee, but thy own judgment about it. And it is in thy power to wipe out this judgment now. And that's basically what it is. People are going to always say and do things. And some of it's going to be wonderful and glorious that they say, and it just fills your heart. But then being human, sometimes we say and do things that aren't necessarily the nicest or the best things. Sometimes we say things that are needful and they aren't taken the best way. So whatever you have on, whichever side of the coin you are on in a given moment, consider the source. Don't just automatically negatively dismiss or disregard, given after you ask these questions, if it's something or someone that fulfills some of these requirements that you have. And have those requirements in your head. So for me, if somebody is going to say something to me, they can't, anything social media is a no-go. If they're family or close friends, they have to know me. They have to know me and have had experiences with me. So I have a personal checklist that I kind of go through to consider the source. Because if you live to be 57, there's all kinds of people that say all kinds of things. And sometimes it stings because there's a truth in it. And I need to look at it. And I do need to consider what they're saying. Sometimes there's no validity to it, and so I let those go. And that helps you keep a balanced head. It helps you keep a balanced heart. And it makes you a better person when you can lay it out really and consider and not just be reactionary. So that is the tip tonight, to consider the source. You're going to have lots of family and lots of love going on, but then you might have a few little thorns going on as well. So consider your situation and the source and what it means to you. You ultimately decide. You ultimately decide what you will believe in what people say. These are just tips and ideas to help you sift through that, to go, what do I believe? I mean, you can hear some of these things and go, no, none of that. If they say something and I don't like it, done. That's your prerogative. But I think sometimes we need to be a little more thoughtful in the things and the way we deal with our friends and people. So the tip, consider the source. If you have extra thoughts about this, share your ideas. I mean, this has been going on for a very long time. And so there's all kinds of thoughts. And I appreciated Tricia bringing up that thought, consider the source. And just thought we talk about it a little bit. So in the meantime, remember you have a creative heartbeat, so listen for it, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.